Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Underground. This is the Intel update for October 27th through November 2nd, 2024. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. I had originally planned to do a separate Intel update and then a follow-on video of last-minute, like election day kind of preparedness stuff, but I'm going to kind of squeeze it into this one Intel update because it kind of all like merges together, to be honest. And none of this stuff's really surprising, so I didn't want to waste anybody's time with talking about, last-minute preps that are really just going to be kind of common sense at this point. Hopefully things will stay decently calm and things won't get too crazy, but it's really important to remember perspective, and things always seem worse when you're going through it rather than when you're looking back on something. Anytime you go through a tough time, it seems like the end of the world, but when it's over and you're through it and you've gone through the tough time, you can look back on it and say, that wasn't so bad. So again, something to keep in mind is that things always seem worse in the moment. And that's just kind of the theme for going into this next week. So let's jump to it and talk about some of the election stuff. Right up front in the Northeast region, this is kind of election related because it's occurring on the eve of a political election, but the Pentagon decided to send another $425 million worth of military aid to Ukraine. Of course, this isn't directly related to the American election. However, you don't normally tend to see this kind of thing. It's generally ill-advised for any politician of any belief system or ideology to, send foreign aid out. I mean, usually that stuff kind of, trickles down to a stop a couple of months before any election, really anywhere in the world. But again, we're kind of seeing how this is continuing even right up until the last minute. So, speaking more directly of more direct election integrity issues, Pennsylvania has most certainly been at the forefront of a lot of nefarious activity. So we all know and probably have heard about the issues in Bucks County. So early voting was shut down at a couple of different polling places a few days ago, and in clear violation of the law, which a judge actually did intervene and say, yeah, these polling places should not have closed early. So in Bucks County, they weren't able to reopen the facilities for early voting, but they did allow voters to request a ballot, a mail-in ballot, a couple of days later, so up until November 1st. Again, it's not the same thing because people were trying to vote in person early, so that really just kind of highlights the don't wait until the last minute, because I think that this particular incident was probably a dry run for Election Day, meaning that the polls and people who run certain polls, especially law enforcement who are aiding a lot of this election sort of irregularities, you can't really separate out the authorities. They're definitely involved in this sort of thing. So for Election Day, don't wait until the last minute. If you're planning to vote, do not wait until the last minute, because that whole idea of if you're in line to cast your ballot, they have to keep the polls open, that may not actually come to fruition in many places. So again, just prepare, make sure you've got some time if you're planning to vote on Election Day, no matter where you're at. That's definitely generally good advice, I think. Also, just throughout the state, there have been a lot of irregularities. For one, the Supreme Court kind of intervened, or rather, more technically, they refused to intervene to stop the counting of improperly filled out provisional ballots. So again, the Supreme Court kind of not really doing what they're supposed to be doing, at least in my opinion, in terms of election integrity. So again, in some cases, it's not as bad as others, but generally speaking, Pennsylvania is kind of a hotbed for this sort of thing. Earlier this morning, Monroe County election officials found a lot of fraudulent mail-in ballot applications. So, that sort of thing's going on. Similar situation in Lancaster County, where they found earlier this week 2,500 mail-in ballot applications that were mysteriously fraudulent or very suspicious, i.e. they were all in the same exact handwriting. They were dropped off in two large batches, So anytime ballot applications are dropped off in batches, that kind of tells you this is probably a, vote harvesting kind of thing or ballot harvesting kind of thing. So I know a lot of this sounds like unconfirmed conjecture, but from a risk management perspective, you have to realize that's pretty much all you're going to get. You're not going to get confirmation, because it's like, what do you want? The criminal to confess to the crime? No, I mean, do you want me to launch a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against very large law firms? Like, I don't have the funding for that. All I have is PowerPoint. So really, in terms of what people are expecting, how much confirmation do you need? How many videos do you need of people reporting? I don't know. That's up for people to decide. For me, I'm kind of sold. But for those people who are a little bit more like, well, is this a case of voter fraud, like confirmed? Well, what does that word confirmed mean to you? And I say this sort of disclaimer in the context of the media. So one thing that did occur, you can't debate that it did not occur, was an ABC affiliate doing the same thing they've done before, and mistakenly or allegedly mistakenly showing the news ticker at the bottom of the screen in terms of the votes as they were being counted. So again, the media group, the TV station, is saying, "Oh, we were just testing election night coverage," but to me, it's always kind of strange as to how all of these media companies are testing. They're testing their news ticker, and it mistakenly goes out over the air. And every single test involves Harris winning. So I know that if you're watching this, chances are you probably already understand this, and this is just kind of, wasting your time to talk about it. But there are a lot of people out there who also have family members who might not understand that the media news ticker for who's winning the election on election day as ballots are being counted, that's probably going to be false. It's probably not going to be accurate. So do not base, if you're planning to vote, do not let a news ticker convince you otherwise. Do not let something or someone derail your plans on election day. Because I think a lot of people are going to be looking at news media, they're going to be consuming mainstream media on election day, and they're going to look and see, oh, the other candidate is winning by a lot, so me voting is not worth it. Please, please, please do not fall for this. This is like basic PsyOps 101. This is information operations. This is something that is intended to keep people from voting, voter suppression, right? So we all know that news media basically has no penalties. I mean, they could break the law every single minute of the day and nothing ever happens to the media. So why would it be any different on election day? Again, I'm preaching to the choir here in terms of people who might be watching this already, but again, please keep in mind that you may have family members, you may have friends and relatives, coworkers who do not understand this. So if you're planning to vote, please don't base that vote or don't change your intentions based on what the media is saying. So again, sort of rant over on that, but I wanted to make sure everybody's aware of this because there's just so much bad information going on out there. Moving to the Southeast region, another sort of reminder of another thing to keep in mind is a lot of states have electronic voting machines, either where they vote electronically and the ballot is printed out, or it's some other kind of electronic system where there's a touch screen. Just be mindful. Like, please pay attention. In Kentucky, there have been confirmed cases of a person trying to touch a touch screen and a alleged glitch because they didn't touch the screen in the right spot, or there was a certain bounding box on the screen to where they touched the wrong thing, and guess what? Their vote switched to the candidate all the way to the other side of the page. So we know what's going on here. Okay, we know what's going on here. I'm not going to go into that, but just be mindful. Do not rush. Take your time. Take your time and make sure everything is correct. This goes for the electronic stuff and the ballot itself. Make sure that ballot is printed out correctly. Make sure you filled it out correctly. You do not want to give anyone or anything a chance for your ballot to be invalidated. So again, this is basic stuff, but I did want to stress it because it's already become an issue. Already during the early voting period, it's already become an issue in many, many states. Sort of switching gears a little bit, down in Georgia, the FBI and a lot of the federal agencies, they're definitely hyper-focused again on election integrity issues from the context of foreign actors. Again, how true is this? I don't know. That's up for you to decide. However, I think that in terms of the federal agencies focusing more on external threats, it's very strange to me how we're so concerned about Russia, and we're not really concerned about the secretaries of states of certain states who are openly admitting to election integrity problems. So anyway, just be mindful. I mean, it makes, on the one hand, it makes a lot of sense for other nations to try to influence our elections and to just try to mess with us, not because they may necessarily prefer one candidate over the other, but just because it's the season for chaos, and other nations love destabilizing us because we've been destabilizing them for decades, right? So something to keep in mind, but how much of that is real, I don't know. Only time will tell. But in terms of the kind of election problems we see going on in the United States, I'm more focusing on the ones that are being committed by U.S. government officials at this point. So again, just as another reminder, kind of to circle back, right, to what I mentioned earlier, in Virginia, Ohio, and Wisconsin, voters are reporting smudges on their ballots, little imperfections in the printing process. Just make sure. I mean, every state has a procedure for what to do if you either get your ballot that's a mail-in ballot, or you print out a ballot, or a ballot's given to you, right, at the polling place. So there are procedures in place for what to do if your ballot is compromised or there's something wrong with it. So again, just check. There are people at the election, centers specifically to try to answer these questions and solve these issues, right? Every state has this process. But in terms of time, you want to make sure that you have enough time to solve any issues. This is, again, why being proactive throughout not just voting but other parts of your life. Don't wait till the last minute to drop that thing in the mail. Don't wait till the last minute to do something, because you may need time to solve issues. Again, I know I'm coming at this a little bit late. It's Saturday, right? Before the Tuesday, the election day, but just again, make sure, give yourself plenty of time. You want to front load these issues, front load the frustrations, so that you're not kind of running around all crazy on election day trying to solve issues. So again, this is really just an exercise in being proactive, trying to front load the effort so that you are not kind of screwing yourself over on election day. Again, similar situation in the Midwest. Moving over to Michigan, we've got confirmed issues, or at least the Secretary of State has openly stated there are issues with Dominion voting machines nationwide. Now, it's not all Dominion voting machines, as far as what the Secretary of State of Michigan has stated. They're specifically calling out the voter access terminals, which are used for people with disabilities or other sorts of issues that they may need some assistance in filling out a ballot. That's a whole rabbit hole by itself, but in any case, the Secretary of State has confirmed it. I mean, that's pretty strong confirmation for me that these issues exist. What's interesting is that the Secretary of State has openly stated that it's a nationwide issue, whereas, the 49 other states in this country haven't said anything about the specific issue. I think a couple of states may have, but it's very ambiguous. No one really wants there to be any issues at all with voting machines, and basically that's all we're seeing is issues with voting machines in many places. So again, this is all, a lot of it's hearsay, a lot of it's just individual case studies. You might not have a lot of evidence confirming something. Somebody may show a picture of their voting, machine glitching out, or a video of their machine glitching out, and then the next person in line's perfectly fine. So that's generally what you would probably want to do if you were trying to cyber attack something. You don't want it to, we all know how the Stuxnet thing works. It doesn't produce an error every single time. It's just, at certain times, right? But anyway, that's kind of getting off topic here. In any case, you just want to make sure you're checking things. Check your ballots. That's kind of the theme for today. Check, double check, triple check. Make sure that the candidates' names are spelled correctly. I really don't actually know what to do if you get a ballot, like a paper ballot, and the candidate's name is misspelled. Does that invalidate the ballot? I don't know. I don't actually know the answer to that. I would assume that it may vary by state, but I'm not entirely certain. Maybe this is a question for a lot of the people working election polls. What do you do if the ballot prints out and it's got a typo on it? I don't know. One would think that these things would be caught early during testing and things like that, but a lot of times they're not. So my guess is that may be an issue on election day. Don't know for certain. Can't confirm any of that, but maybe that might be something to be mindful of in terms of misspellings or typos, because it seems to me like the typos are occurring with just one particular name, at least from what I have seen so far. Now, whether that typo makes it onto the actual ballot, I don't know. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that turns out. I mean, there's just so little to grasp that's like, confirmable or decently like, reliable. So, again, moving out west, we see a few different things going on here. So again, Colorado has been in the news because they leaked. The Secretary of State's office uploaded an Excel spreadsheet that had a hidden tab that they didn't scrub the metadata from this, so they allegedly leaked all of the passwords for pretty much every voting machine in the state. So again, coming at this from a malice or incompetence angle, they could just have been stupid and somebody uploaded the wrong Excel spreadsheet, or they thought that hiding the tab meant that somebody couldn't open it once it was uploaded. I mean, that would not be out of the realm of possibility for this just to be someone who's an idiot, and doesn't know how Excel works. That's government 101 for you. But if I was a malign actor and I was trying to cast doubt over an electoral process, that's exactly what I would do. Make an intentional act seem like a mistake. These days, when government is involved, an intentional act that, in any other career field would be an intentional act. It really looks like a mistake when government's involved, because government is, and people who work in government a lot of times are not the brightest bulbs in the toolbox, if you know what I mean. So, again, does this mean that the Colorado election is kind of locked up? I don't know, but I would be willing to bet some shenanigans are going to result from this. So, and it's going to be impossible to nail down without independent analysis. It takes many, many, many years. But something else to consider that's not really specifically related to a ballot interference is more along the lines of like just election interference or voter suppression more directly, are statements by celebrities. So, again, this is kind of a rabbit hole by itself, but so for those of you who have not heard or have not seen this incident, Jimmy Kimmel went on his allegedly comedy show and stated or encouraged Trump voters to vote several days after the election, like as part of a joke, right? This is how these kind of things happen. It wasn't necessarily phrased as a joke, but, anyone in Hollywood can kind of say whatever they want and nothing happens to them. But in any case, people may see that and may take it seriously. I doubt it, but I mean, people have gone to jail for much less, circa the Douglas Mackey case from a few years ago. So this really isn't so much a concern for, those of you who might be watching this, but it's more of a concern if you have people, who friends, family, neighbors, whatever, who might not understand the nuance of this, and they may accidentally see a fraudulent post on social media and they go to the wrong place to vote, or they do something that would, invalidate their otherwise good ballot. So, again, something to keep in mind. This is really the season for deception. So people should really, really, really pay attention to things like that. Something that's also slightly more concerning is we already see the insanity ramping up in terms of the National Guard. So the National Guard has already been activated in Washington State to just be kind of on hand for civil unrest that may or may not happen around the election time. I'm also seeing orders being cut for Washington, D.C., so several states are already gearing up for the inauguration. We all know how this is going to go. It's going to be another goat rodeo, another tens of thousands of National Guard deployed for the most free and fair election ever, right? Same story, same song and dance as 2020. There's really not much more to say about it other than just, keep in mind this kind of thing is probably going to happen. So that's it for the news portion today. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the GhostNet stuff in terms of, the general communications plan, so to speak, for the next week or so. For those of you who have not seen, version 1.5 of the GhostNet plan is out. It's incorporated a lot of new stuff. So for those of you wondering, like, oh, what's changed? Everything. Every single page has changed in some way. For the most part, the content's not is not any different in terms of the HF radio stuff. But I've changed typos on pretty much every single page. So it's definitely worth a reprint for those of you who are into making these little books on your own sort of thing. More options on that coming in the future, but. For now, this is pretty much one of the, it's just an option. So if you're into using radio and you like using radio during an emergency or a routine emergency, this is something that might be of interest to you. In terms of the GhostNet plans for like this election stuff, I'm probably going to be on it. You can read the new plan in terms of standing up CrisisNet or maybe using a slightly higher strategic radio condition leading up to the election. That's on you. That's up for you to decide. Again, I need to have a dedicated video kind of talking about the changes to this and some of the new kind of doctrinal ideas we're kicking around with this. But for the most part, you can just kind of read through it on your own, and you can kind of see where we're going. We're trying to increase resiliency, redundancy, and things like that. This is not the best thing since sliced bread, but it is an option. Okay, it is an option that has gotten pretty good traction. So I think it may be helpful for many of you out there, and for those of you who are wanting to use your Baofeng with it, I have a shared set of frequencies on that. So in terms of line of sight communication stuff, it's going to be really, really hard if this is all you've got. But if this is all you've got, there is some level of support. Okay, there's some level of support. There's no net, there's no meeting place, there's not just frequencies, but that's better than nothing. So again, baby steps. We're going to get there, but I feel like I had to put this out just so that people had something, rather than nothing. So again, a series of international calling frequencies or whatnot for the low-cost radios. It's in there now. I question how useful that is. Personally, I don't think it's very useful, but it's there. If all you've got is a Baofeng or a Quansheng or whatever, it's there. So again, how useful is it going to be? I don't know. But again, we've got it. So GhostNet has been hopping lately. I've left my radio running a couple of times and just found random people sending random news reports like in the middle of the night or something, and I think that's just awesome. Like, it's such a decentralized, but it's coordinated. So you never really know who's going to be sending a news report when or anything like that. But we have the ability to share information even if a very catastrophic cyber attack occurs. So with that kind of radio stuff out of the way for now, let's talk about some of the preparedness stuff that I'm thinking about and kind of working through from now until election day and through the next couple of months, really. So again, just to sort of stress the whole idea, I'm not expecting calamity. Okay, I'm not expecting the world to end on Tuesday. I just don't think that's very, very likely. Now, unrest, yeah. Mysterious things happening in the middle of the night, probably. But in terms of just preparing for the apocalypse on a certain day, that's probably not the best way to go about thinking about things. So, again, just as a reminder, none of this should be surprising for any of you who have any sort of common sense. This is all just common sense stuff. But I'll run down through it anyway, just as a reminder, just in case you forgot something. I do that all the time. I forget something. And so let's just run this down. So the very basic stuff, basic preparedness: food, water, shelter, medical, and electricity. Make sure you're good to go on those on that front. In terms of the basics, food and water kind of thing, I know that it's hard to do. I know that grocery bills are very expensive now, and it's hard to prepare for long periods of time. If people, are having trouble buying groceries on a weekly basis, it's very disingenuous to go tell them, oh, just go buy 6 months worth of food. No, that's not something that goes over very well. So if you can buy extra, buy extra. Don't go into debt just because you're trying to prepare at the last minute for some sort of potentially crazy time. But buy the food that you normally buy. Stockpile as much as you can, but don't go overboard. if you just had a few days is the bare minimum. A few weeks would be good. Months, now we're talking, very crazy times, and there are other needs that pop up in that sort of time frame. But again, prepare as much as you can. It doesn't cost very much to do the very bare minimum, and we always want to make sure that we're not being left out in the cold, so to speak, when it comes to things that might happen. So basically, just do what you can and don't worry about it too much. Seriously, like I want to stress that, a lot, because it's very easy to slip into a world is ending kind of approach with this preparedness stuff a lot of times, and that's no way to live your life. It's really not. I mean, I have to keep telling myself that a lot, to be honest. So I'm right there with you guys. And I say that in the context of this line right here: be prepared for the long haul, but don't self-isolate needlessly. That's a tough thing to do, isn't it? Because when we're talking about these preparedness things, it seems like everybody's tense. Everybody's kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak. It's kind of a very tense time. There's a lot of anxiety out there. There's a lot of tension, and it feels like everything's just getting ready to snap or something like that. It's easy in that kind of environment to just shutter yourself away, lock yourself away from the world for a couple of weeks and just kind of sit there and stare at the wall and panic. Don't do this. Don't let fear influence your decision-making process too much. A little bit of fear is a good thing, because that motivates you to assess the risk more accurately, which we'll talk about in a moment. But letting fear just be your primary decision-making process, that's no good. So again, assess the risk, which we'll talk about here in a second, but don't let things get you down too much, because we're going to get through this. It will be okay. We're going to get through this. As bad as it seems and as crazy as things are, turn off the social media for a minute, go outside, take a break. Don't worry about it too much. We're going to make it through this okay. In a couple of weeks, some kinds of anxiety will be gone. The uncertainty will be gone. It may be replaced with other kinds of issues, but for the most part, don't worry about it too much. Don't let it get you down. So, in terms of more practical stuff that you can do, if you're looking for something to do, one of the things that you can always do is intelligence preparation of the battle space, or IPB. You can always improve this. This is not a one and done thing. You can always improve your IPB. You can always improve your knowledge of your local area. Even if you live in a very remote area, there's always more things to consider in terms of your IPB process. So again, I have a whole video on this. If you want to check that out, it's not that long and it's not that complicated. Even just the most basic, IPB process laid out on a bar napkin is a good starting point, and you can improve on it from there. So if you find yourself, hey, I've got some spare time, let me run through my IPB stuff and see if there's anything else I can throw on my local map or things to consider in that regard. Similar situation with risk assessment. We can always reassess the risk. Now, if you haven't done any risk assessment for your area, again, I have a whole video on this in terms of things that you can think about and ways of thinking about things, which is the most helpful aspect of risk assessment. But just more generally, risk assessment is all about figuring out what are the biggest vulnerabilities to you and how they can be mitigated. You're not always going to be able to mitigate a risk perfectly, but you can reduce it a little bit, right? You're never going to eliminate all risk, but we can do things to reduce that risk. So being able to be in the right frame of mind, don't let fear take hold of your decision-making process, and really assess what are the biggest threats, what are the biggest concerns to me, and how big of a concern is it? Because everyone's going to have a different risk assessment. That's why it's so hard to teach, because it's a process. It's not a do this and you'll be okay sort of thing. So, and this directly ties into the next one, which is your gear shakedown. So I know myself, basically everybody who's probably going to be watching this is looking around at their stuff, making sure their tactical gear is all good to go. That's all well and good. You should always, make sure that your gear is good, whatever gear that may be. But we also want to make sure, again, with the risk assessment, coming at it from the risk assessment angle, are we preparing for the right thing? Again, everybody has a different role. My role is largely information and communications and things like that. So should there always be a baseline of like tactical proficiency? Yeah, sure. But we also have to remember that, not all of us are going to be grabbing a rifle first. We may be grabbing our cell phone first. We may be grabbing a radio first. We may be using that more realistically. So when shaking down your gear, you can definitely consider that. Like, are we really concerned about the right things here? Are we preparing for what we want to happen, or are we preparing for what's actually going to happen? That's a huge thing to remember because, again, we just get inside our head so many times in the prepping world, for sure, and we try to prepare for the scenarios that we want instead of the scenarios that are most likely. So separating out what's most likely to happen as opposed to what we want to happen, coming at things from a more neutral and higher level perspective might be helpful for many of you out there in that regard. In terms of communications more specifically, I think that, again, not to try to go against what I just said, but I think communications are a huge part of the coming issues, right? In terms of what is most likely to happen. In short, point blank here, I think that a large-scale cyber attack is very much on the menu for either election day or shortly after or shortly before. May even happen today, who knows? But, and maybe not just one attack, maybe not one cyber attack that takes out the whole nation at once. I mean, that's an okay thing to plan for and then walk it back to something more reasonable. Again, most likely course of action versus most deadly course of action. We try to plan for the worst case scenario, but also consider how different would that plan be from what's most likely to happen. So I think what's most likely to happen is social media outages, maybe some cellular outages, because a lot of people are going to be using their phones. A lot of people are going to be, because it's election day, think about it just from an infrastructure perspective. A lot of people are going to be away from their home Wi-Fi access points, and they're going to be congregating in one place. That's going to overwhelm cell towers, even if voting was not in a part of any of this. So, again, you see this during like big, events, that they haven't planned for cellular networks to be like, boosted up. You see this happening all over the country in localized areas because, well, a lot of people in one area not on Wi-Fi is going to, cause a lot of strain on cellular networks. So it doesn't necessarily have to be nefarious. But even if it is, being prepared for that, having a plan, having a lost contact plan here in the GhostNet, you can use like the very first page, I think, allows you to have basic passwords and plans just in case you get separated from your family or your team or whatever. There's a lot of different things you can cover, and we'll talk more about these in the future. But again, 99% of this is just having a pre-established plan. If your cell phone stopped working, what are you going to do? How long is it going to take you to get back to a level of, operating normally, sort of thing? So, if you're traveling, if you're at work or something like that, could you get from point A to point B without using your cell phone? Do you have a paper map if you need it? You may know the route between your home and where you work, but if that route is closed in some way, can you still get home from work? Do you know your city well enough to do that? A lot of people they get in their car every morning and they drive to work using the same route every single day, and they don't necessarily remember, well, what if this highway is closed today? Can I still navigate my way along back roads to get home? So very simple things like this, but again, something to definitely keep in mind. Like I said, just to kind of put a cherry on top of all of this, I don't necessarily think that the world's going to end on Tuesday or even the rest of the week, however things go. But again, we definitely need to be a little bit more mindful, be a little bit more prudent. Make sure your gas tanks are topped off, kind of thing. Because we know that this is just a high risk event. This is where our risk starts getting a little bit higher. Just because of the timing of it, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be able to identify, malign actors. We may not be able to predict specific incidents. We just know that the potential, the means, motive, and opportunity, all of those factors are increased. So that's really the general gist of this. You don't necessarily have to go all crazy. You don't have to self-isolate. You don't have to do anything completely insane, but just recognize the seriousness of this, and we'll kind of take things as they come, right? So that's pretty much all I have for today. Here are the sources again. Not like it's going to help you very much because these sources are probably going to change by the time this comes out, because news media is changing their articles as we speak. We all know how this goes, but So hopefully I won't have too many priority wire reports this week. I think we're all kind of expecting things to get a little bit crazy here and there, but I'll do the best I can to kind of try to stay as like objective as possible, in terms of like trying to provide more resources for people who may need it. That's just kind of where I'm at this point. So yeah, that's kind of my plan for this week. I'll probably have to push out quicker updates either on Twitter or Telegram or however other many platforms I have, in terms of like rapid fire information if needed. I'm still going to try to do standard wire reports as normal, maybe a routine one, maybe some priority ones here and there, depending on how things shake out. But it's pretty much going to be business as usual. Again, this is not one of those things where we're going to miraculously just find ourselves suddenly shocked and absolutely surprised that all this kind of craziness is happening. Like, we've been predicting this for years, so it's really nothing out of the ordinary, and nothing worth freaking out about at the last minute for sure. So again, hopefully things will be pretty calm, but if not, we'll handle it as things come. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for all of your support, and we will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.